Aloha and welcome to E Hana Kako, a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of Grassroots Institute, and today we want to wish you, on behalf of Think Tech Hawaii, a meaningful Memorial Day. What do you think about when Memorial Day comes? Well, we think mostly about the men and women who have given their lives in service to this great country. Today, my guests and I are going to talk a little bit about the dark side of paradise. Here we have the beautiful weather, the beaches, the sunsets, the lovely people. But that's not all that Hawaii is. And there are many things that we would never know about were it not for this man who has broken some major scandals into the news media and has risked life and limb doing so. My guest today is investigative journalist and environmental protector, Mr. Carroll Cox, and you'd know less about Hawaii were it not for him. Carroll, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I do wish you a meaningful Memorial Day.
Yes.
I know you have some thoughts about that. You're always telling people what they don't know. What's something we don't know about Memorial Day?
That, first of all, we should give thanks that we live here in America. That's the first thing, that if you don't like something, you have a right and the freedom to change it.
That sounds good.
That's what's good about Memorial Day. If I can keep remembering that and then understand and appreciate those men and women that have fought and given their lives and all and limbs to make this process viable.
Well, one of the things here in Hawaii that we celebrate is really the melting pot of all cultures, all ethnic groups. And we've not always been all that great in acknowledging the different people who've come here from all over the world and made a difference. And you were just telling me a little bit earlier about some of the people who somehow got forgotten in terms of their service to our country.
We were speaking of the West Lock, 1944, May 21st. There were at least 130 some odd African-American soldiers detached from Schofield Barracks working on the 29th Decontamination Unit at Pearl Harbor in West Lock and on LST 353.
And those
exploded.
Are those transports, the LSTs?
Transports, and they were preparing to support Admiral Nimitz in his attack on invasion on Saipan and Marianas and Guam and those areas.
Well, that sounds like it was very hazardous duty. And you say that was a largely African-American unit?
A large African-American unit that was there. There were other units and non-African-Americans, Caucasians and others, but history shielded and sheltered that aspect of it, and it was never known until recent history. In fact, a gentleman by Dave Smith and Mr. Ray Emery, retired Navy personnel, started to bring that up and present it, and we now know that.
How many of them gave their lives?
Well, it is estimated. The Navy say 165. The records that Mr. Ray Emery has put together indicates 132. And the bigger issue is that the unknown soldier, unknown is stamped on their grave sites in Punch Bowl, while the issue is they know who they are, but they are dragging their feet.
Really? So
yes.
About how many of that 130 or so are actually marked as unknown?
I don't know the exact number, but it's a large number, at least 30, 40. And so Mr. Emery and the African American Diversity Culture Center is actually working to put that together.
Now, isn't that fairly high in terms of recovery of the missing?
Well,
don't we usually do better?
We do better, but remember, this was one of the most volatile moments, incidents that there. Usually, some of you are vaporized due to the explosions.
My goodness.
And they were several vessels exploded with ammunition and major ammunitions, artillery rounds or what have you. So some were blown and burned completely up. So,
well, on this Memorial Day, our hats must be tipped to those who've given their lives in serving their country. One of the ways in which our country is well served is by the fourth estate, journalism, keeping a watchdog eye on government. And recently, you got knocked in the head, didn't you?
Yeah. Well,
tell our viewers about that. I mean, you were treading onto land on which you were conducting an investigation to check out some information, and it wasn't too safe for you.
Well, just remember, in every profession, to be successful, you got to use your head once in a while.
There you go. Well,
So,
what happened to you?
well, I was in pursuit of trying to bring closure to an investigation that have been conducting for the last year and a half at least, actually 2 years, in the nefarious activities occurring within the Hawaiian homelands, because there are beneficiaries sitting waiting with their names on the list, thinking that they're going to benefit from leases and business leases and what have you, but that's not a reality.
Now, you and I have talked about this a lot, and I know you get passionate about it, that for years and years there are Hawaiian beneficiaries who've been waiting to acquire homestead land administered by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and yet that land has somehow ended up into the hands of other people, and you're taking a look at that, and that took you onto homestead land recently.
Yeah, and homestead land, which we uncovered 13 tons of calcium hydroxide just dumped on Hawaiian homeland. Imagine the damage that it would cause to the environment, one, and imagine the cost that it would clean up. So that's money taken out of the beneficiary's pocket, which will, you know, because of reckless management. So we uncovered that. We uncovered oil dumpings and other chemicals being buried, and illegal acts of marijuana growing and all kinds of things, just solid waste being dumped. Contaminated soils transported from military bases and elsewhere with chlordane, dildrin, aldrin, all of these things being placed on Hawaiian homelands under a, quote, management by the state of Hawaiian homelands.
What's going on? How does this happen? Is the land just left fallow out there and people drive their trucks up and use it to dump because nobody's watching? Is that what's going on, or something else?
Actually, the land itself had controlled by the Department of Navy, United States Coast Guard, and as a result, they gave it back when they closed the base, the bigger portion of Barber's Point. And the State Department of Hawaiian Homelands received a large portion of that land and proceeded to lease it out, rent it out, and what have you. And there were revocable permits, and one specific one, revocable permits, and the governor, based on my work and the news articles reported by the Honolulu Star Advertiser, the governor became a little wise and said, we'll convert them from revocable permits and make them right of entries, which neither would work because you're only allowing a month to month. And who in their right mind, what legitimate business would engage and set up and take, and you know you only have a month to month and can be canceled without reason. So you're not going to invite the upstanding companies pretty much anywhere unless you pull strings.
Now, you've been looking into companies that have acquired some of this land while beneficiaries have not been able to move on to it, and you've discovered some of the things that they're doing in terms of subleasing.
Yeah, so you take one specific, when I got hit or attacked,
Yes.
it was, I make light of it now, but it was an attempted murder. It was not to beat me and to remind me that I'm getting too close and, you know, cripple me. It was to send me off into the places where you follow the light to get there. So heaven or wherever.
Well, before we get into what you were investigating, tell our viewers a little bit about that story. This wasn't just wandering onto homelands and somebody thought you didn't belong there and got mad at you. This was a masked individual who followed you and beat you.
Well, what happened is that I'm sitting and have learned that this land was under the control of a trucking agency, where we're trucking, and I confirmed that by speaking to the owner of the trucking company, who said, yes, I don't have a revocable permit, I don't have a right of entry, anything formal. I have a handshake with the land agent. Now, this is during a time when the governor has declared that no leases or anything would be given out. There's a moratorium. So I proceeded, and I noticed that there was a trailer or modular home situated on there. And through rumors, I had heard that this modular home, the person that had it was compensating the Wohi Athletics to $500 a month to store it there.
Wohi Athletics, is that a charity, or is that the company?
It's considered a nonprofit here in the state of Hawaii, but and so I proceeded to look into those documents and contacted the owner of the modular home and was able to obtain copies of checks that were paid to this nonprofit.
So you've documented all of
It was
this.
all documented.
It's not just supposition on your part.
Right. And so there I get a call from a beneficiary who would be benefiting from my work. And he proceeds to tell me he's going to move it at 12 o'clock. Well, I'm out there to photograph it. And while I'm sitting there looking with my camera, up pulls two trucks, or a truck and a car, and quickly convene on my car and start to pound and hit me on the head. And so that's what I was doing.
Were you knocked out?
Oh, eventually I was knocked out.
Eventually, that means the beating took.
Yeah.
How long did the beating take place?
I don't know. It goes real quick.
And what's the damage you sustained with your
9
head?
staples in the head here, and probably I would say they're more worried than I am now, because this is the unraveling of their dastardly deeds for the last 6, 7, 8 years, and that's what I focus on, because you got to sacrifice something to get to the truth, because the governor fails to make sure that things are done properly, the agency fails to, and the Department of the Interior fails to. This is a congressional mandate set aside by the United States Congress, the Hawaiian homeland. It's funded by them. But historically, of all many of these projects,
sure,
it's always, we gave them the money and see how they ruin it. Well, in this case, the beneficiary never, ever, ever has control.
So, in the case of the Oahe trucking, this is a tip of an iceberg, but what's deeper? What's really going on here in the homestead lands? What are you unraveling? What are you showing?
Well, I'm showing that, give you a specific example, one individual beneficiary who tried to follow the rules and play the game submits her name for a company to crush rocks in trucking. She's denied. It took practically 6 years, and she's a legitimate, good standing in the state and what have you, family business, denied. But shortly in the last year and a half, 2 years, where she was denied and had a desire to set her business up, Department of Hawaiian Homelands told her, we don't want that kind of business here. Subsequent to that, in a short time afterward, they allowed not just one business similar to hers, but 2 situated there. So it was, my goal was to look at this and show the disparity and show that the program that is touted as being beneficiary minded, really the beneficiary, there are no beneficiaries. What the Hawaiian Homelands is, it's a safe haven for failed politicians. You know, Norman Sakamoto, when he failed in his efforts to become the lieutenant governor, where did he land? He's not a senator anymore, but he's now, or was, working at the Hawaiian Homeland. So it's a parachute for the Democratic Party. That is what it's been. And I don't know how many went there with Linda Lingle, but it's a nesting and a resting place so that Norman can go abroad to the other islands and talk democratic politics under the pretense that he's looking out for the benefits of the beneficiaries.
So you're suggesting that when beneficiaries are denied the use of the land for businesses or even for residences, that other people are getting use of the land because they are politically connected.
Yes.
And in the case of Oahe, you've got a situation here where land is then subcontracted to others.
Yeah, a portion of it is used to obtain money and to store things while never having control now of that legally. So he had no legal right to be there, period.
How extensive is this on Department of Hawaiian Homeland's property?
It's extensive. Let's take an example. Pasha, while I talk about Neil Abercrombie and his shortcomings, the same thing or similar occurred under Linda Lingle, where Pasha, or Pasha as some would call, Pasha is situated on Hawaiian homelands. But instead of paying lease just for itself to the Hawaiian homelands, it actually subleases to a great many larger companies, and in turn they pocket the money and pay Hawaiian homelands pennies. And that was another part of the investigation that I've come. And instead of charging him, and one of the things that I'm paraphrasing is that Pasha is able to rent one portion of land or a couple of leases or acres and then sublease it, contrary to what our rules are, because when there's a lull in the economy, we want them to sustain themselves. Well, then you would think they would give that same courtesy to the Hawaiian beneficiary or the Hawaiian community. So what I was looking also was to show, historically, we hear that the war on poverty, the war on drugs, the war on education is a failure because the beneficiaries squander the money. The reality is, and I felt that the Hawaiian Homeland is a more modern entity, and to show this, is that it is not the beneficiary or the people who's targeted that abuse it, the welfare people. It is the upper echelon who abuses without oversight.
So you're documenting, and you've got extensive documentation, I've seen some of this, that companies like Pasha are granted the rights to use the land and then sublease that out, or through a series of deals, make it available to other businesses that are not the beneficiaries. And so really the beneficiaries don't benefit, and not only that, they're not able to use the land. You know, this doesn't seem right, because as we say in Hawaii, this should be pono, this should be righteous, but this is something that seems to be feathering the nests of a very few. Do you think that this is something that can change? How can change come about to this?
Well, first of all, let me share with you. I did have the occasion to meet Pono on Hawaiian homelands, but he was so disgruntled and disappointed. But there is no such thing as Pono within the Hawaiian homeland. There's an individual who has submitted his name as a beneficiary, as an individual. But what is really happening, and it's in your face. It is the most insulting, unchecked acts that you'll ever witness from the state government. We talk about transparency. This is transparency, but in the wrong way. We can see right through them. We can see the lies, but here's the problem.
All right.
The Attorney General will not prosecute. I file complaints. They won't prosecute. No action. The Interior Department won't take action. The Hawaiian Homelands Commission is one of the most lethargic, ineffective entities that I've ever seen assemble, and I've seen many organizations and commissions assemble.
Well, thank you. We're going to come back in a short break. You're hearing a remarkable set of stories from Carroll Cox. Some of them we would never know about were it not for his investigation, and yet they do end up in the major media because he's respected as an investigator, and he actually documents his trail very, very well. We'll have more with Carroll when we'll come back right after this. Don't go away. You're on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Alion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it pono.
Aloha and welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. This show is called E Hana Kākou, which is based on the venerable saying E Pule Kākou. Let's pray together, but we also need to work together. E Hana Kākou. We want to unite Hawaii's people to build a better economy, government, and society. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and I'd like to say mahalo to Jay Fidel, the general producer of the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I think that about 20 or so hours a week is being produced on this network, and you can take a look at everything being produced at the website, www.thinktechhawaii.com. Well, today's is a fascinating episode for us on the E Hana Kākou weekly program. I've got Carroll Cox, an investigative reporter, an environmental activist, somebody whom you don't want looking into your business if you're in government and not doing things pono, as we say, righteous. We've been talking about the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, but that's not the only thing he looks into. Carroll, you believe that there's a network of agencies in which people are working together to promote the darkness, to do things that just are not right in this state. You want to give us an example?
Well, when we look at the Department of Hawaiian, the Health Department.
All right, the Department of Health.
The Department of Health. I would say, based on the 20-some-odd years that I've been involved in doing investigations and whatever, they present a greater problem, and it serves as the greatest impediment in any law that is written, in any regulations or resolutions or any effort, even on my part. Remember, I have no law enforcement authority. So whatever I find, I must then find my way knocking on the health department's door.
Now, before you go on, this is one of the things that's quite remarkable, because for a lot of the stories that you investigate, you're first on the scene, as you were with the Matson molasses spill and so forth. And I'm often wondering, where's the government? Why isn't the government looking into this? Why isn't the Attorney General looking into this? Why aren't the police in some cases looking into it? But instead we've got Carroll Cox with just one head left.
Well, but let me clarify something. I wasn't the first on the scene.
Okay.
But I was there when the state health department, Gary Gill himself, arrived, and Alton Miyasaka from DLNR. They're there, and I'm saying to them, I'm down here because I got a call from a worker on the Matson yard saying that the pipe leaked. And they're telling me, oh, we can't talk about that. Not right now. We don't know what it is. And I'm telling them. But I'm also saying, you know what it is because a year ago you got a letter, a memo, telling you that they had found that it was leaking. And you investigated, and you have regulations above ground storage tanks. The fire department has regulations and checking. So this is the big lie. The health department is one of, as I said, one of the greatest impediments. It is not an agency that it should be trusted. And I can quantify that and qualify it because we have cases where there's salmonella in the stores with poke. When we saw the first introduction of poke on the market, imported from Vietnam, Philippines, and many of them were being rejected because of salmonella, poisons, and chemicals. And you weren't even knowledgeable of being informed by the grocery store. So I took it upon myself to actually file a legal action against Safeway, Don Quixote, and others, and successfully sued and had them to agree that they would label and tell us what it was. But in the interim, the health department knew that there were a number of people who had gotten sick from eating this imported poke and refused until we disclosed it and went back and investigated to identify Safeway and others and which Safeways was selling this product.
So you're saying that a lot of times all you are doing is exposing what a government agency already knows, and you're alleging actually is hiding. Why is this information not out there? Is it because they're doing their due diligence to make sure they're just not acting on spurious information? Or is this actually being withheld? Is it being hidden? Are they covering something up?
It is, the intent and the motivation is simple suppression. All that I'm doing is seeing an animal and tickling the underbelly, looking at the underbelly, what makes it work. And again, you see, they have import regulation, they have inspectors, they have agreements, they have permits. And so in that process, one would clearly, and you would have sample food inspectors. And you have rules. You don't dupe the public or the consumer by claiming that it's cod from Alaska when it's pink tie reef fish or what have you. You understand? So there are rules already. Why aren't they being enforced?
Now, that's an important question. Is it because we don't have enough personnel, the budget is too low, so they need to go to the legislature for more money? Is it because of basic incompetence? Or is there something more nefarious going on?
It's the nefarious underlying act because, you see, if you had 1,000, all that would do is repeat 1,000 times what I'm doing. If you hired 1,000 effective inspectors, they too would be met with the same treatment. So we don't need more. We just need more positive, honest, genuine regulatory effort. These things are in place already. We have the Food and Drug Administration here who checks and inspects. And again, it is a state who is mute on many of these instances.
You know, one of the things I like when you and I talk is that I kind of get to see the work that I do in stereo. Mm-hmm. On one side, I'm a little bit eggheadish. At the Grassroots Institute, we like to quote Lord Acton, power corrupts and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. But what you're doing is the other side of the stereo, which is actually digging under the belly and showing exactly how that is happening. But Carroll, if somebody pushes you and somebody says, you know, you're just seeing a bunch of inefficiency in the system, you're just seeing a bunch of bureaucrats covering up because they're lazy and they're waiting for their pensions and all of that, you suspect that there's something more. What have you found is really at the cause of why the public is just kept uninformed, why the information is suppressed?
Well, it's the design of the system. Keep in mind now, the Department of Health, as with any state agency, has on staff an Attorney General deputy. So they're getting good legal advice and good legal guidance. They take no steps without first, I hope, looking at the legal implications. But more times than many, they're looking for how can we cover our butts or cover that entity's butt, or that person is a great donor to the governor or what have you. And you see in this party, what I've witnessed more times than many, it comes back to who is the politically connected entity. The public, the general public, is sacrificed. Their interests, their well-being, their welfare is sacrificed for the sake of the party. And I mean here because of the power. What I witness in this, I make this statement, the Democrat Party is one that has tolerated. We see no new legislation, for example, illegal dumping. They try to assign a quantity. If you dump so many cubic yards, then we can do this. Wait, stop. What if you dumped a bag of asbestos this big? Would that be acceptable? It's not 6 cubic yards. You see the way they're playing, and so they've been responsible for the degradation and the depletion of our natural resources in the worst way, because they've been in 40 years. And I would say this about any party, Republican, Libertarian, if they fail, because the idea is to be honest about what you find. You're just reflecting the facts.
Now, do you also investigate the relationship between bad practices and campaign spending, or is that just a generalization you're making?
No. For example, I'm the one who's responsible for uncovering and bringing to light Mufi Hanneman's. This is just one instance of his fundraiser in Pittsburgh. You understand? And so to go further, to demonstrate, even though that I had uncovered that and we knew that he was going to be in Pittsburgh while proclaiming he was going to be in Washington, D.C. I even spoke to the offices that he claimed that he was visiting, Macy Hirano's office, and they said, no, he wasn't there. So we aired that piece on KHON. You would think he would have been prosecuted because in that flyer, he solicited money, he or his second chairman. You can only have one chairman of a committee. So he had two. So here's the problem. On that document, it had an FEC, Federal Elections Commission number. Problem with that is, the most glaring, it's not a federal election. He was running for state governor. So why didn't the Attorney General take a legal action? It would be a federal crime, soliciting money. Well, then he explained, it's not a fundraiser. I was back there drinking beer with my buddies. Well, you can't use the taxpayers' monies to go drink beer with your buddies. Well, I left the money there. Well, subsequent to that, one of his underlings pled guilty for some minor $200, $300 act, and then he quietly was permitted to file and pay a fine of, I don't know what, it was some ridiculous amount. So yes, I do look, because they are all connected, you see. A trucking company that does not get certification and hire its people and get certified, and the health department does not inspect them because he got carte blanche insurance policy because he gave at the office or gave under the table or what have you. We can't tolerate that, not for the sake of people as a whole.
Now, you've just raised something which we call selective enforcement. There are a huge number of rules and regulations by which businesses need to operate here in the state of Hawaii. The Department of Health has many. And what you're suggesting is that if someone's politically connected, they will get a free pass, the inspectors will look the other way, and is it also the case that if they're not politically connected powerfully enough, they get the inspectors on them?
Exactly, and we don't have the time here, but if anyone cared to challenge or want insight, I'd give them specifics. Companies where they've not even gotten a slap on the wrist because they were politically connected, and other companies who may be Republican or have a Republican leaning get trenched, you know, just drowned out, and or repeatedly inspected, while others seeking a permit of sort similar will get a permit by rule in the old days. So you wouldn't really have to go through all of the things. But I want to digress one moment back to PASHA, for example, in Hawaiian homelands.
Yes.
There's a company called Road and Highway Builders, had a major contract on building the Saddle Road. Road and Highway Builders moved to Oahu and settled down on the beach at Kaomi Loop on that side. Endangered species are there in that immediate area. And here's the problem. I file a complaint with the health department, so they then tell them they have to move. Where did they move to? They moved to Hawaiian homelands while there were supposedly no new leases issued, and they've denied this one person a right to open a similar business. So here's what happened. Road and Highway Builders sat down, established itself again here, imports some 55,000 tons of gravel and sand every 3 or 4 months. To accommodate him, that company, DHHL, allows him to use a gate. I call it Gravel Gate. It's on Malakoli Street. To allow him to operate, or that company, Road and Highway Builders, to use a gate to circumvent detection, avoid detection by the DOT weight and measures.
So you're saying one state agency is making it possible for a private company to get around the regulations of another state agency.
Right, and so the DOT operates, they put their scales there and your trucks go over it. Well, they don't operate that way. They go to the harbor, they pick up the sand, they're overweighted, uncovered, trucks are problematic, but they're allowed to come in the dark of night. And we term that gravel gate. And the thing is, we've reported this. Not a single act on the part of the governor, DHHL director, or what have you. So there's favoritism, and these are just small examples.
Well, this is incredible because you actually end up confirming a lot of things that businesses and ordinary citizens suspect. And if people want to really look into this, where will they find your information? Where will they find your documentation?
CarrollCox.com. Most of it is presented there. I have a radio show. CarrollCox.com. It's podcasts. It's all the documents there. And if they want more documents, be happy to, free of charge, to get them there. Just send me an email and I'll post them, send by now. Make sure they have room in their hard drive to receive them. So,
what is your favorite expose where you actually, let me qualify that, where you actually saw something happen in the system that changed, that justice was accomplished because of something you exposed?
Well, right now, the current one, I'm with anxiety waiting to see this unravel, the Hawaiian homelands, because there's going to be a number of revelations to come out of this and confirmation that the beneficiary is not benefiting anything. And one thing I want to clarify, this area at Barbers Point is not residential. It is strictly business. So you would think the agency would with the need for commercial space here, you would think they'd be really efficiently managing it. So my best operation would be the Pu Vaimomi housing, where there was a claim by the DHHL and others at the pump house that children, little boys, 9 and 10-year-old kids, went in and broke into a pump house and stole the mercury and took it back to the housing and contaminated housing. They had to shut down the housing. Well, I got involved through an invite by a police officer who said he didn't like what was going on and there was a cover-up. And I went in the dark of night and documented and found that actually under the Kaitan administration had received hundreds of thousands of dollars in trade-off for the land there and to clean that up, but left the mercury that came out of a pump, freshwater pump, left it in a bucket, and the children came by and picked it up and thought themselves as being the terminator, and then transported it back. What was the results? How did the DHHL, the Hawaiian Home, not Hawaiian Homes, but the health department treat it?
Tell us when we come back after this break. We're on a cliffhanger right now, and you're hearing my guest, Carroll Cox, who is informing the general public of so much that we otherwise would never know. I'm Keli'i Akina. This is E Hana Kako on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. You'll hear the rest of the story.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to a fascinating episode of E Hana Kako. Let's work together on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. My guest today is Carroll Cox. Well, we're talking about some things that are just tragic, really egregious. And before we left off in the last segment, you were talking about children down in a housing area by the stadium who came across mercury because of the negligence, if we put it mildly, but probably worse than that because of the criminal activity of the state.
Again, this was a pump house, an old pump house for Pearl Harbor. Mercury was contained in the system to lift the water, to operate it. Children came in and found it in a bucket because it was an environmental cleanup that the state and feds left in place. So they transported it across the street to the housing. The state's reactions to that, Gary Gill was the deputy at that time, and sealed off, brought in the National Guard, sealed the units off. People that were pregnant couldn't come back home. Women that had a baby that was out with their mother, 2 months old, 2 weeks old, couldn't reach and feed their babies. It was that drastic. The 2 children were charged with breaking in and basically would have been charged with felonies. I met with Chief Donahue, the police chief, and he agreed to drop those charges and not pursue that. So, but there is a justice, but an injustice at the same time. Gary Gill, they've set up their command stand, and standing in the midst of mercury was the police officers and Gary Gill and his crew. And what they did, they set up a battery of washers and dryers, and mostly dryers, to drive away the mercury from the clothing and creating mercury gas right into the homes. So by getting the children not prosecuted and then assisting in getting them legal action, legal aid, they were able to recover from that hardship some monies for that entire housing. But that's one of those that I'm most proud of, where there was a direct relationship and benefit to the work, and I could see it instantly.
Well, you're fighting for the ordinary man and woman out there, the little guy really, against government, against businesses that benefit from the government. And so let me just ask you this, and it has a lot to do with why you're on the current case you are with Department of Hawaiian Homelands. What drives you? What motivates you to risk life and limb to expose the truth?
Actually, it's just for the love of people, for the love of myself. It's innate in me. It is a natural reaction. Some of us do different. Mine is to take what I know and apply it to help others and to protect the environment. And we could have in this state a flourishing business climate if we were just to be a little more efficient and more burdensome with paperwork, because we get nothing done. The papers that exist at the DHHL and what have you, and the state health department and many of these agencies, is taxing and takes away from good management, good business management, good sound management in business, and it's a distraction. 3 months, 4 months to fill out an application and wait for years. So we need to get away from that, and in doing so, as we are efficient, we will see a cleaner environment. We won't have to worry about the fly-by-nighters because there will be efficiency. But today, it's a long ways away.
Well, as our program nears an end, let's come full circle. You started really by talking about the current case you're working on, investigation into the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And in keeping with what you just said about loving people, I don't see how anybody's heart cannot be touched by the fact that so many people who are beneficiaries, who should be beneficiaries, have stood in line for decades, indeed died waiting in line to acquire Hawaiian homestead land. And, you know, in the past, there's no easy way to talk about the history of the transition of the Hawaiian kingdom into eventually becoming part of the United States. I think people who've looked at that in terms of history recognize that even today we don't have a consensus, but we do have the capacity to move forward. And one of the ways in which we can move forward is through programs like the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is supposed to administer, but how tragic it is that it's not benefiting the beneficiaries. So what do you see as the bigger picture as to what can bring change from all that you've looked at?
I suggest, based on what I've seen and the difficulty it is in getting things done, boarded up homes on Hawaiian homelands, the infrastructure not being, I would submit this. An immediate change of the guards. The people get to elect, the beneficiaries get to elect the chairman of the commission. As it stands now, the chairman is the director as well, taking orders from the governor. So there's never, ever anything good that's going to come out of this on the behalf of the beneficiary. Never, ever, ever, because of the way it's designed. Just the basic handling of their agenda. They can move it around freely, and they disregard or disrespect the rules of law, the Sunshine Act and all of that. They don't publish their minutes of meetings. They refuse to give draft minutes as they're required to after 30 days. So there should be an effort immediately to take away that authority from the governor. And I also believe that the governor, there should be criteria set so that in the selection of the commissioners, it be a meaningful one, these people are vetted, and that they can make decisions, but those decisions be selected by the beneficiary.
What you're really talking about is more power to the people, taking power away from the government and giving it back to the people, the beneficiaries, and allowing them to make their decisions themselves for what benefits them the most. Now, there's such paternalism, though, isn't there, to say that if we let the people decide, they wouldn't know how to decide so well. But what you've shown is what's going on. You know, another defense, though, might be this. aren't there other agencies that are supposed to be watchdogs that represent the people? For example, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, 9 trustees elected by the people. The Department of Hawaiian Homelands is not their land directly, but of all agencies, shouldn't they have been watchdogging? Don't they meet monthly with the board of Department of Hawaiian Homelands as well?
Now, I've never had children of my own, but I've had the opportunity to witness many families and successful, and they all tell me, at some point, you have to relinquish the reins to that child and let that child go out in the world. So if that applies to a raising of children, are you submitting or suggesting that the beneficiaries at some point, it's been since the 20s now that the Hawaiian Homeland Act has been in place. And look where we are. At some point, how many years are we going to wait? Almost 100 years, and we're still debating whether we should give the beneficiary. They're grown-ups, you see. So if you can do it with raising children, I'm sure you can do it with a population of Native people or beneficiaries.
Well, what you're really talking about is this mentality of government, that government knows better than the people. Our program doesn't have time to go into this, but a wonderful Hawaiian lady and scholar, Ruby Johnson, has for a long time pled with the government to allow homesteaders to actually purchase the fee so that they don't lose their lease. And they don't lose their lease if their children should drop in blood quantum or their grandchildren should drop in blood quantum. But one state official put it this way, and it just struck me. He said, you know, Keli'i, if we did that, our people, they're not smart. They'll lose the land. And I thought about that. That's the exact opposite of the kind of thinking you're talking about, where we recognize that people need to be adults, and when we treat them as such, they rise up to that. And we need to see that government stops trying to play the role of being a parent and do so badly. Last 30 seconds, Carroll, do you want to say anything to our
audience? The greatest
audience?
Disrespect that I see now being perpetrated on the people is the willingness to say that they're not educated enough, trusting enough, and caring enough that they can handle their own affairs, that you gotta have the American government or Big Brother managing them. That's the greatest insult. So nothing will ever change as long as that pervasive, that attitude is projected on the people. Never.
And on this Memorial Day, we honor those who died in order to preserve our right and our freedom and our responsibility to act for ourselves so that the power would be in the hands of the people, not the government. Carroll.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
All right.
And God bless you and keep you safe as you do it.
Thank you.
My guest today, Carroll Cox. You can read his research at carrollcox.com. Is that right? carrollcox.com. I urge you to go there. Incredible what we don't really know unless we dig deep and see the dark side of paradise. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, promoting individual liberty, free markets, and limited government and accountable government. I thank Jay Fidel and the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network for putting on such a tremendous array of shows. We will be back with Ehana Kako next week. Aloha.